Started. So, welcome to everyone. Those of you who have been with us from the beginning of this series are aware that we've been trying to cover the arc of how to think about responsible AI all the way to deploying it. And also, I must say that even if you get regulatory approval and you are able to deploy a solution, it's kind of like the snapshot. While you would say real safety, real understanding is like the movie that starts happening after the deployment. And unfortunately, there aren't that many people who are willing to watch the full movie after the snapshot has come that everybody has put on social media and gone.
Yeah.
So today we will be speaking to experts regarding how we should be thinking about, initial design, initial testing, validation, all the way going to phase 4, perhaps post-market surveillance. What truly makes responsible AI responsible? And I'm going to say from the outset that this is a really hard problem. Once upon a time, we had narrow AI that we somewhat understood what exactly it does. And to some extent, when it did what we expected it to do, we had a reasonable expectation to keep doing what it did as it got exposed to more and more things, as long as we did not change the distribution too much. And even if you look at the word validity, there was always this thing called construct validity. Are you measuring what you choose to measure? Because we designed those AIs. There was typically internal validity because, again, by the process of designing them, we made sure they are reasonably measuring the right thing. And the only things we had to worry about was external validity, that the population where we trained it, when we take it out, if the statistical distribution completely change, things could go wrong. Today, we are in a different age. Today, we are in the age of foundation models. The entire ideas of construct validity, internal validity, external are not lost, but they are much more difficult to measure. In fact, you would say the surface on which to imagine this type of thinking has just become much, much larger. And this is too complex a topic for me to really think of or explain. So we have brought in some real experts to explain this to you. I'm going to introduce them in the very beginning. So, and we'll come back to them again in the end. To start off, we'll have a keynote speaker, Dr. Vasantha Venugopal. Vasantha is a radiologist who was amongst the first person I knew in the Delhi NCR, totally immersed into AI and thinking about solutions and how we were all going to transform the world. He has seen these solutions come up. He has seen them being deployed. He has advocated for better control over how we deploy them. He is now a professor of practice. Now it's Professor Vasantha Venugopal, and I'm very glad he'll be giving the keynote. Professor Akhil Arora will be joining us from Denmark. He is a key thinker in this area from the technical side, who would also be bringing a lot of wisdom regarding how, as modern AI comes, do we need to change our thoughts. And many of you already know Mr. Vikalp Sahni, who will hopefully become a professor of practice. So I can call him Professor Vikalp soon. But Vikalp has been a thought leader and an action leader in India, thinking about deployment at scale. And we'll introduce him more when the time comes. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Vasantha to start with the keynote and take us through how at least he looks at this very complex matter. Thank you,
Thank
Vasantha.
you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Anurag sir. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have been, silently watching some of the previous sessions. It's one of the, most useful initiatives. All congratulations and kudos to you and your team for doing this. So yeah, the way I'm going to talk about this is that let's play this movie backwards, right? Let's assume what happens after you have deployed an AI solution, right? Me being a radiologist who has deployed AI solution has the experience and luxury to talk about post-deployment monitoring. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately also in a different meaning, the other fields are yet to reach that stage, right? So what I'm going to do is for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about what happens after you deploy the solution, what challenges come up, and how do you monitor them, monitor these solutions continuously without breaking the bandwidth. That's the concept that I'm going to talk about. Let me try to share a small deck of 10 slides only. So let's start from the... Can you see my deck?
Yes, perfect, Vasantha. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Almost everyone in this meeting room knows the importance of why we should be doing post-deployment monitoring. So I'm not going to talk about that. There are 5 different frameworks or processes in which we can think about monitoring. In fact, we recently came out with a white paper on this published in Radiographics. I'll provide the links of those papers at the end of this session. For a deeper reading, I recommend you to study those papers. So, we break these frameworks into 5 different categories. A lot of acronyms here. Broadly, you need to focus on 2 components here. The first one is human in the loop. And the other thing I want you to focus here is on the human on the loop, right? Basically, so after we have deployed a radiology AI solution at some of our centers, there was a question about how do I know whether the solution that I deployed is performing continuously at the same level that it performed when we did the pre-deployment validation. So that was the key question we are trying to address. In fact, even today, most sites follow this mechanism, human in the loop. The way that works is you have deployed AI solution. Let's take a chest X-ray AI solution. The solution runs, the AI output kind of shows up to the reading radiologist. They look at it, they generate a report. After the report is made, the report is automatically kind of extracted and the text report is converted into AI labels and it is compared against the AI labels that are being provided by the AI solution and the performance is evaluated. That's the 99% of all deployment sites are today. If they are having some kind of monitoring systems, monitoring in that way. The second mechanism, which is more scientifically robust, is what I call as the human in the parallel loop, wherein some studies, a small proportion of the studies in that site, are passed not through the AI, but just presented to the radiologist in their routine workflow. The radiologist reading those scans don't see the AI outputs. They make their own reports without AI assistance. And those small proportion of the reports are compared against the AI outputs for performance. The advantage here is, the radiologists are not getting biased by the AI output in the first place because, in the first system, what you're doing is you are measuring the radiologist's impression, which is generated with an AI output against the AI output. There's definitely going to be some kind of an automation bias. But the problem with the second system is that, again, there is a certain proportion of the studies that don't get the benefit of AI, number one. And again, this is a small proportion. There's going to be a sampling bias that's going to happen there. That's when we thought of a completely, not a different way of doing this monitoring, which is the human on the loop monitoring. The idea that we proposed here is, what if, we run all the studies through an AI solution. We don't look at any ground truth. We just look at the predictions of those AI solutions. And by some mechanism, based on the longitudinal change in their predictions, can we identify some kind of an drift in the performance, some kind of a performance that is out of an expected range of predictions? Then we define a threshold for that and then go and intervene when the threshold is hit. So that's the concept of human on the loop, wherein these studies are processed through an AI and they are analyzed. The AI outputs are analyzed independently without any radiologist effort. And whenever the predefined threshold is hit, we look at what has happened on that particular day or that particular time period of the predictions. So that's the process of human on the loop. There are 2 other systems, human out of the loop and human over the loop. Human out of the loop is completely autonomous. There is at no stage there is a human intervention there, which is completely impossible or unsafe to use in healthcare or more so in radiology AI. And this is those differences. Let's look at how this works in real world. This diagram may be small for some of you to read, but again, this flow chart is available in the paper that we came out. You can study more about that in more detail in that paper. What happens here is, as I said, then alert is triggered when a threshold is breached. Now, when we know that the AI system performance is out of the expected range, there are a couple of things that could have gone wrong. Number one, the AI system itself is kind of drifting. Its performance is not, as we expected. Or, as you know, in radiology, when we deploy the AI solutions, there are several other factors that will influence the way in which the AI performs, which includes the acquisition parameters, the technical parameters, the patient population, in fact, the reader, or in fact, even the PAC system or the RIS systems that are being used to study those scans. So when we look at in the stage 2, once the alert is triggered, we have a mechanism to look at each of these different components independently to look what has failed, whether the AI solution itself has drifted, or is there something in the ecosystem of the AI that has caused the AI to, behave out of the expected range. Compare this against the other system that we defined, that I presented to you, wherein every study or a small proportion of study is double checked by a radiologist. The challenge with the human in the loop system is that the reason why we are deploying AI in first place is there is a definite lack of radiologist availability. We are suffering with a shortage. The idea of deploying AI is to overcome that shortage. Now, if we expect to provide radiologist bandwidth to monitor the AI solution that's being deployed, it kind of beats the purpose of deploying the AI. So that's the kind of the practical issue that we face, right? When we go to a system and say that, after deployment, also radiologists have to look at those scans to see if they are performing fine. They come back to us with the question that what's the point of deploying the AI then if I have to look at the studies to see if the AI is performed well or not? That's where we introduced two concepts. One is called, we call it as temporal stability, and the other is predictive divergence, right? Again, these are based on the statistical principles called Jensen-Shannon divergence. I won't go into a lot of maths here. I will simplify it for everyone's sake. If you think of the solutions that are deployed in radiology AI today, most of them that are regulatory approved, even though we are in the world of generative AI, most of the solutions that are regulatory approved and practically deployed are CNN-based solutions with a probability score, right? They give a prediction in the range of 0 to 100. Now you have a number for each study. Now, if there is a center that is doing a few hundreds of studies every day, and the AI solution gives predictions to all of them, you get a set of numbers which range from 0 to 100 for all those studies. You keep that number at baseline on one side, and the next day, when the AI runs again, you have another set of numbers. Now you can measure the divergence between the numbers on day 2 versus day 1. And based on your pre-deployment validation, that's an expected range of divergence that you accept. If the divergence is crossed, one thing, that something has changed in the AI's environment. For example, right, if on a particular day, the prediction for pneumonia has diverged significantly from the past predictions, one of the following things is true. Number one, either there are a lot of patients who are coming up with pneumonia today as compared to the past, right? That's one thing. The other thing, something has changed in the acquisition pipeline, which is causing the AI to predict more pneumonias than usual. Or third, the AI itself is kind of drifted for this day or for this week or for this month and showing a lot of pneumonias than usual. Now that's analysis is stage 2. In stage 1, you just use these divergence metrics to trigger an alert, And then the stage 2, you go and do an analysis on what has changed in the ecosystem. Right? A couple of advantages are there in using the system. The systems that we used previously, I talked about, the human in the loop systems are post facto systems. What do I mean by that is the AI is deployed, the predictions are shown to the radiologists, they have made their decision based on the prediction. And then if there is some mistakes in the AI performance, you're picking it up later at a later point of time. Whereas in the system, it's pre-facto, wherein you have an ability to trigger an alert even before the AI predictions are shown to the radiologist. That way you can, if you have deployed, say, multiple solutions across thousands of studies, you have a mechanism to trigger an alert even before the damage is done. No, building on that concept, we also have what we call as a predictive divergence, wherein the idea here is, if you have the capability to deploy more than one solution, you can compare the performance of one solution against the others. In the world of generative AI, it becomes much more easier, right? You can compare for the same prompt, you can compare today against Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT and see, how they are diverging from each other. Similarly, in the world of CNNs also, using the same set of numbers, you can again predefine a divergence threshold, and once the threshold is hit, you know that something has changed, you can go and intervene here. So those are the high level concepts here. And the same concepts can be expanded to the world of vision language models, right? In vision language models, typically you don't have a probability score. What you get is either a complete report, which is a text with a lot of sentences. There are ways now we are working on where we can extract some parameters, labels from those texts and use the same metrics to predict some kind of a divergence. Or you can also use the embedding space to convert all those outputs into a vector space embeddings and define divergence metrics, again based on either Jensen-Shannon or some other divergence metrics, to prefacto predict if an AI solution is diverging from its expected frequency of predictions or not. So as I said, once you have that alert triggered, you can either verify whether the model is performing badly or whether the operational parameters have changed or the pipeline is changed. That becomes a stage 2. This mechanism of post-deployment continuous monitoring is no more a luxury. It's a necessity for many of these regulatory bodies. The FDA, European Union, even the Singapore now mandate such monitoring after deployment. So that's where I'm going to stop. Over to you, Dr.
Thanks, Vasant. That was absolutely interesting to see how you are seeing it in the world of radiology, these things occurring. And I know that you deployed multiple solutions. So a couple of questions before we start the full panel. One of it is, of course, you already spoke about models that performed well and then the ones that you monitored them after. What was your overall experience? How many of the models that you deploy turn out to have problems later on? Is it something that people should be genuinely watching out for? Is it a rare event? How does it
No, it's
mean to you?
sure. So actually, it's surprisingly not a rare event, right? Because what happens in the pre-deployment validation phase, if you have the bandwidth and the team inclination to do that, you do a pre-deployment validation, right? Most places doesn't do that. They don't have the bandwidth or the inclination or the interest or the time or the to do that. So they go by what is claimed in the published literature. They get surprised, right? How could this system miss such a big bleed? All those things. And even if you do a pre-deployment validation, you're building a curated data set, which is not what we call as a toxic data set, right? A toxic data set is wherein you voluntarily put in some outliers, some edge cases to pressure test the system so that you are aware of where it will fail in real world. Typically, this testing that's done is very kind of a publication safe, AI vendor friendly test, which doesn't pick some of these edge cases, which you will definitely see in the real world.
No, that is really interesting because if somebody was to not do it, simply take standard cases, put them into the system, probably get good answers, be happy, stop
Yes.
watching.
Yes.
Disaster could come and one would never know.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Vikalp, I want to move to you for the question to you. Vasantha was describing his experiences in radiology. You have to deploy in multiple different possible health contexts. You probably deploy across languages. You probably do as much of generative deployment as you do with narrow model deployment. And you look at a variety of customers ranging from clinics to hospitals and contexts. The problem that Vasantha very, clearly described in the world of radiology to give us all an anchor. So what it looks like over there, I know for you it becomes an even bigger, messier ball of wool type of problem. So how do you look at it?
No, and thank you, first of all, for inviting here. And this is my privilege to be talking about our experiences and also listening to Dr. Vasantha and everybody else, Professor Akhil. Um, to give like due credit to Dr. Vasantha, I think his problems are far deeper. It's like he has to come at practically at a diagnosis. Definitely, the problems that we face is quite messier, but eventually it's like solving for the productivity needs or solving for the generative documentation needs for the doctors, nurses, etc. But having said that, these are like a extremely diverge and large amount of different things that doctors or patients can definitely do. For us, uh, obviously, the pre-deployment validation processes are extremely important, but I feel that it's still far from the place which we could say that it's structured and there. To uh, uh, keep it simpler from a healthcare perspective, I feel it's broken. So to say, most of the model that we evaluate, let's say when we want to fine tune also, these benchmarking data sets are practically open data sets. These are but the data sets which are MCQs and the public scientific information, which is important from a so to say like 5-10% of evaluation perspective. But when it goes, then when the rubber hits the road, it's a messier world. And more importantly, it's easier for models also to tune themselves with this public data, with this information that is already being available, and then try to sort of make more like a leaderboard model preparation rather than the real world model preparation, which is what evaluation at times becomes like chase for the rankings on the leaderboard. And we've tried to speak, and where we want to invest on is to work with industry bodies, with people where we have data sets that are closed data sets, model deployments that are being tested as a model, and agentic pipeline is tested as an agentic pipeline, because again these two are very different things. In one way, we basically test a model and say that okay, this will be the accuracy, this will be the cost, this will be the performance. When you go to the agentic world, the accuracy, cost and performance has a very different meaning. So to say, from a outset, for a consumer it would be the same, but it won't be the apples to apples comparison if we compare a model with an agentic pipeline and so on and so forth. So that's the other area of sort of conflict, so to say, we see. And the third pre deployment, where we feel that there is a need in the ecosystem, is to have like a real bodies who are actually working on evaluations of these models, and not like we sort of talking about our laurels all being there on the benchmarking boards and so on and so forth. Um because what happens is, when we work, we always get ourselves sucked to a specific problem and a use case, and then we might miss out on the broader leverage that an ecosystem can provide. And I think there we believe research institutes such as Ashoka and other bodies, we would want more of that to happen in a structured way. So that's where these are our struggles on the uh, pre-deployment side of stories, and then post-deployment is yet another beast altogether.
No, thank you very much, Vikalp. I think your point on agentic is particularly well made. Because if one of the parts of your full deployment is an agent that goes outside, checks the web, then gives an answer, many things are outside your control. Your model could have been great, but since you have an agent that goes
Yeah,
out and checks the ICMR website or the government website, and somebody that day uploads a wrong document or something like this, your performance would shift considerably. So the minute
correct.
you go outside the boundaries of your model into the world, your errors and things like that could completely change.
Yeah.
Akhil, I want to come to you with another question that always is tricky. Everybody speaks about fairness, equity, but reports average accuracy. Somewhere in the footnote, you will have, we did find that our check-stray model did not work particularly well for women. But then we note that, women have breasts, men don't, and therefore we don't really worry about it because how could our X-ray perform that well? Because that was an anatomical problem. Now, it's very common for people to report average accuracies and forget the subgroups. But many people would argue that that's simply just another form of error waiting to happen. So when you look at equity, and I know you do work on that, you look at fairness, you look at subgroups, you look at what people are getting out of the model. Is it what was intended? How do you look at this problem? Because it could be much more than just human in the loop, percent accuracy, or human on the loop, model drift, and all those things. Over to you.
Great, perfect. Thanks, first of all, Dr. Anurag, for this invite. And I can see also Sahaj in the audience. So thanks for the invite as well. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I think I've been following the talk and also the points made by Vikalp, and thanks, Dr. Vasantha. It was a great talk. So it was very revealing to see how practitioners are also talking about the same principles that we researchers who don't do anything in on the real ground also think about. So yeah, it's really nice to see where I would say somehow concepts theory meets practice, right? So that's very nice. Yeah, I mean, your question is really spot on, right? And I think what I would like to say here is that this is the first risk is when people start trusting publications, right? This is what Dr. Vasantha said, right? People just look at publications, and the problem is what people report, right? And I think the issue is that when majority of the world talks about these publications, or they have an agenda, right? I mean, I would quote something that imagine the research on sugar was never done properly, right? Because of lobbying, because of so many different factors, right? And that's why sometimes it's very hard to trust all medical journals and all papers that come out of there, even the top tier ones, right? Because there is someone who's kind of paying for these studies. And that's why, so I'm saying the first attack at this aspect is that first we have to push whoever cares about this have to push the community to actually talk about proper scientific reporting, right? And that's missing in many cases. And even if it does, as you says, Dr. Anurag, right, it's basically somewhere in a footnote, and a careful reader might find it, but someone, because I think when we're talking about tools that we buy for hospitals, there is a marketing team involved, there are so many different people involved, they might not even look at it, right? They said, okay, we have found the best tool for you, you have the choice between these two, and both actually might just be junk, right? So that's the issue, because scientific reporting is not clear. I see a message in the chat that, okay, you can find evidence for almost anything. That's perfectly right, but the problem is that is in a fine print or in a footnote somewhere, or is this like literally the headline, and nobody reports that, right? And to answer to that, I think the things that we do, in at least in our lab, when we are talking about specifically now AI models, I was also following that. I had some points and just kind of tying them in. So as Dr. Vasantha said, right, that it's easy. It's even easier for LLMs these days to do some, investigations. I would say yes. It's a double-edged sword, right? It's easy to do many things, but it's also hard because these models will confidently say that, okay, yes, this looks good, but they might be wrong, right? And this is a work that we have done with the folks at EPFL in Lausanne, in Switzerland, where I think Sahaj also knows about them. And I think they're also very familiar with Ashoka, right, Dr. Anurag, so you might know them. And we were literally looking at this, that can we separate the underlying reasoning logic of a model from the language abilities, the fluency, the parsing, right? And that's where this aspect of trust comes in, right? So coming back to your point about how do we treat biases and whatnot, right? So the first is that we have to understand the systems can be noisy and they can be wrong. And so that's the first acknowledgement. And the other aspect is that there's an obvious limitation. People would say, we don't have data from different groups. How do we even publish it, right? So this is the Matthew effect, right? When I mean, I got exposed to this term when I started reading more social science papers. So it's a social science concept, right? So rich get richer. So the problem is the average population, at least the average, is skewed by people who are actually literally in the majority, right? Or for whom we have most data. But there are several aspects which never get reported. And even if you do, you will not have statistical power to say that, okay, is this, even if they deviate a lot from the average, is this deviation and statistical aberration, or is this the actual truth? My answer to this is that even though this could be a statistical aberration, it should still be treated carefully, because in high stake domains like healthcare, and there is no outlier in my opinion. That is a life which could be lost because you are thinking of it from a number, or you're thinking about it like a mathematician, and that doesn't apply, right? So I think in terms of this, we have started looking into also how we should report variances and distributions and not just an average number. You would be surprised that paper has been sitting in under review for the past 8 months. Even the machine learning community, who should literally embrace this, is kind of coming up with different faults about that paper, which, okay, I acknowledge. But the problem is, this should be a big wake up call for anyone that, okay, variances and distributions should be reported, and it's not just the average. And you would be surprised that most models that we use out there, even the most powerful ones, have a huge, the distributions are not, quashed. They have a very gradual, shape. So you can see that there are many things which are on the either ends of the spectrum. So I think it's more about how I could say it is that, okay, we should build better tools. And I think the paths to solve this is that there should be partnerships in a way that, okay, right now, like, gone are the days where academics are not interested in actual field work. So in a way that, okay, at least in my lab, I would say we are excited to actually partner with hospitals and bring whatever knowledge we have, but also learn from people who actually have the on-ground knowledge, so that we can build proper systems eventually serving humanity. That's what I would say to conclude this point. Sorry for the long response.
This is very valuable. And I know, Akhil, that you have also worked on synthetic data. So this problem of distributions that you're talking about becomes even more acute if people produce synthetic data that is taken from the majority and the tails collapse, and then it'll become even more. So it's, I think, a very important point that you said, that whatever data people use, if you report the distributions, it'll become better for the community. And I think open science is, of course, a way to go along this. Vasantha, I'm going to come back to you. But before I ask you the exact question, I'm reminded when, Akhil, you spoke about the tails. 1972, BMJ had a paper where people used a computer program, basically rule-based probably, to look at the diagnosis of acute abdomen. And they were comparing it to the human doctors over it. And within the team, they even looked at the senior most doctor versus the diagnosis by the computer in the very beginning with the very initial data. And they actually found the computer outperform. And the funny thing is, when I was looking at the actual table, it was because of non-surgical causes. Surgeons were much more likely to diagnose appendicitis because they see surgery, while the computer was far more agnostic about things that may not require surgery. So I guess humans are susceptible to the same bias. But with that said, Vasantha, in your experience of deployments, what keeps deployments good, safe, organizations happy, doctors feeling trusted? What are the principles you would tell people that you would say are the important checklist for them to run through to make sure that any deployment they were to think of leads to happy, trusted situations?
Actually, we can think of this in two different approaches. The one is, in fact, practically, if you deploy it in a hospital, defining the safe, trusted versus useful becomes sometimes interestingly different, right? I'll give you an example, very much practical example. The most widely used radiology AI today across the globe is a fracture detection on X-rays, right? It's not just X-ray, it's not lung nodule, it's not mammo, it's fracture X-ray. Fracture detection on X-rays, that's more widely used. The reason why it's widely used is there is a clear-cut ROI that you can demonstrate while using these AI solutions. I'll give you an example. Like if it's a busy MSK practice, you typically expect out of the 100 studies, 15 to 20 to have fractures. 80 of them won't have any fractures, right? Now, a radiologist who is running through 400 studies, he knows that there are going to be some 70, 80 fractures here. I have to pick those fractures first. Rest are going to be normal, right? So now, what I'm looking for in this case in an AI solution is which doesn't miss even one fracture, right? I want the false negativity to be 0, right? I don't want any fracture to be missed. I'm okay even if the AI picks up, abnormally high false positives, because I'm going to look at it and then I'm going to resolve it in a second. But, if I have to look at a normal looking X-ray and pick for some minor fractures which is hidden, look for minor clues for a fracture, that's going to take me more time than if I know that if an AI says that there is no fracture, I'm sure I can skim through it. So the most happiest user of an AI is someone who is using fracture detection X-ray, even with a lot of false positives. Now, if you do a post-deployment monitoring research study for this deployment, all your traditional performance metrics are going to be screwed, right? The F1 score is going to be really bad because there's going to be a lot of false positives. The only thing that's going to look good is the false negativity rate. It's going to be really near the 0, right? So when we talk about trusted AI, we have to think of the intention and the ROI, the region, the return on investment reason for which it is deployed. If the performance is analyzed, keeping in mind the reason why it is deployed and what are the clear needs for the user rather than a pure academic statistical metric, I think that becomes kind of a safe and happy deployment. In a future world where everything becomes autonomous, when radiologists lose jobs, the conversation becomes completely different. But today, we need to be aligned with the ROI question.
Thank you very much, Vasantha. But I do know this, that on this you will face pushback from some radiologists who, when faced with a very sensitive but low specificity algorithm, start learning to ignore it. And then what happens is that once in a while they will hit that rare case where that AI said yes, they rejected it, and the answer was yes. In which case, the legal liability is something that we are yet to fully understand. So, an AI that is highly sensitive, you're right in the workflow, you can completely trust their negatives. But I am yet to understand what will mean from a legal defense standpoint when you overrule a correct yes with a no. And I'm curious to understand later on, whenever it happens. I only know of one case so far, and we are seeing what will occur. But you're right, from the overall workflow point of view, you're right. This legal complexity of medicine is a quirk of our system.
I know, just a quick note on that.
Sure.
Of course, there is going to be a legal issue if you dismiss it. One of the things that we as radiologists are taught is document whatever you feel, whatever is going through your mind, right? The way to avoid this is I have noticed that the AI has picked this fracture, but based on these findings, I diagnose this as not being a fracture. If you document that, then you have a much better defense in a court than than being questioned whether did you look at the fracture, whether you look at the AI output or not.
Right.
Like document
Right.
whatever you are feeling, then you are safe.
Yep. So Vikalp, how do you deal with the same problem, keeping people happy after you deploy your solutions? What do you look at? Vikalp, your microphone is muted.
Actually, Dr. Vasantha practically answered this, but I'll try to elaborate this. And me being in a situation where it's more applied AI, where we have to deploy this into the doctor's chambers and into hospitals and so on and so forth. I think what Dr. Vasantha mentioned, the ROI or the usefulness becomes like the epitome, right? It's about that how much are you able to solve the problems that today I am not able to solve, even to an extent if it solves for the productivity by like 15-20%. And what I have seen in all of this is people are very creative to now solve for these ROIs, because now they know that, okay, this is a tool, say an ASR, which is now scaling big time for us, where our scribe solution is getting deployed on doctors' chambers. Incidentally, I don't know whether I would be given how I would be treated by the doctors to say that the doctors are the most difficult people to build a software for, because for the good reasons, for the accuracy needs and for the way they need their ROI to come together. But what is also happening in deploying these ASR solutions is I can see that now, because there is a lot of documentation that already is happening, and there could be hallucinations, there could be inaccuracies, but it actually solves a lot for your typing problems, your research problems, your cart creation problem, which actually is a straight away ROI for the hospitals. You deal with that by giving like another set of eyes or another set of process on top of it. So that I am seeing also a lot happening in particularly applications where these are getting deployed. And to me, that is a pretty heartwarming, that there is a real benefit that people are able to draw out of it, while there is a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of taking all of these models, all of these agentic pipeline to be more accurate. That's our experience. What we also do, just to on a closing remark, we run a lot of studies and NPS surveys, so to say, where we try to understand what exactly is happening in practice, and where you are getting stuck, and what exactly where we can solve for. And many a times, these solutions are necessarily not an AI solution, but an application around that AI, which actually allows them to be more productive or be more better with whatever they are doing for. And that's how we sort of make our customers and users happy.
That's very useful. And again, I think you emphasize the same principle that Vasantha said. You have to look at the user, make their life better. So, Akhil, you're the academic. You don't have a direct customer in medicine that you're deploying for. So, we'll give you the hard question. Now, when it comes to post-deployment monitoring, now with agentic AI, generative AIs and things like this, how do you think that is going to work? Because at least with specific models for specific tasks, most of us who have deployed for medicine kind of know there is one workflow, there is a statistical distribution of outputs. You could put humans on the loop, that what Vasantha said. You could, of course, always have human in the loop and providing you discrepancy, errors, and things like this. In, for example, my wife's teleology practice, The number of times they're rejecting an AI read is always tracked. So probably this can be done. But now it's a new world. The same thing could be used for multiple things. There could be agents. How do you think we're going to do this?
Yeah, I think I would say first I would kind of first say that people should be watchful. It's see the people who are pushing these models. I mean, not people. I mean the corporates that are pushing these models. They have a business to run, right? They would never say that these things don't work and where they don't work, right? I think, and as you say, uh, the model itself, I think we need to kind of, I think many people don't know this, right? That these models, which are LLMs, are basically a probabilistic oracle, right? You can even say that if I'm using a strong word, it's an oracle, but it's a probabilistic oracle, right? Even if you say it's a know-it-all, it can just tell you everything because it has seen the whole internet. But the probability part or the stochasticity part is the key catch, which people don't know. The average user doesn't know that, right? And while that is an important factor that makes it work, right? That makes it non-robotic, everything, right? But that's also the thing that causes hallucinations, right? So my point is that was the starting point, right? Yeah. Thanks, Avnish. Yes, exactly. Right. So that's the thing. And that was the starting point when we had models, right? Now I'm just switching back to when you say when we'll have agents, right? Because it's not just a model on which can be the source of error. An agent gives you the whole workflow, right? And the sources of error can be at so many different places. And it's even more abstract than what it should be, right? As you were saying, when you said exactly, right? When someone asked a question and if a document was updated and we don't know from where on the like there was a web search and you don't know where this document is coming from, it can completely in RAG we call this term as a distractor. I don't know if everyone has heard of it, but a distractor is something that can just serve as it's not an adversary, but it serves as something that distracts the model. So you inject something in the context of the model, which the model uses to answer or provide you facts. And this is something that can distract the model completely and throw it off, right? So the chances of this happening with agents is even higher, right? So I would say when we talk about agents and when we talk about high stakes, I would say clear no first. Like that would be my suggestion, that should only be done. Like whenever we talk about agentic workflows, it should be done in a very careful setup. It should be done in the lab. It should not be in any of these phases which we're talking about. I mean, I'm presenting a very grim figure, but that would be my suggestion here, because there are so many places at which we can fail. And we should really build these workflows from the ground up. They're very fast to build. You can build a whole workflow. Like if Dr. Vasantha asked me today, okay, I needed something from my department, right? We can literally build something in one day, which you can test, right? But then there are aspects that we need to inform you, which people don't, right? That there are these 6 sources of errors. These are 6 modules which this agent will rely on and where the errors can come in, right? Memory is a big one, which again, like these are the issues that I'm just sharing, which like even companies like OpenAI and Google are trying to fix. I don't know if you have noticed this. When you have, so when you are talking to your favorite AI model, right, whatever that is, if you have multiple sessions and if you have defined a rule in one of the session, that rule can apply to other sessions when it was not supposed to be applied, and that rule may not even apply to any of the session where it should have been applied, right? So this is what we call about memory or the meta memory, which is kind of hidden from you, and you don't know when this meta memory is right or not, right? So let's say if you ask questions like who's the purple cap holder, right? I'm just giving a cricket reference because many people love cricket, right? So uh, and the question can, like, the answer to this can change every 5 hours, right? So this is where I say agents are very hard to I mean, these fun questions are a separate thing where lives don't matter, but in this case, when you talk about agents, you need to be very careful about what is the source of knowledge, what are the tools that this agent is calling, can we commit before we like can we commit without before verifying each of the individual stages. So these are the kind of questions which, right, I think right now at least companies and also people in academia like us who are working on these topics are working on. So I think this is So first is like whoever is building this, I think Vikalp, you're also at the customer facing side, right? And I mean you are the bridge. So I think it's important to kind of also expose everyone to these issues.
No,
Like I'll just end
that's
at this note.
yeah, please
Imagine
go ahead.
when we used to have transactions, right? Nobody realized transactions actually come from a database system concept, right? Banks work on that core concept that was given to us by the field of database management systems. There and when I'm just referring to the terms like commit and rollback, they actually came from this whole community. Now, why we trust our banking system so much? Because it relies on principled aspects of transactions and how we can control concurrency and everything, right? Sorry for the technical jargon, but some of us understand, right? Transactions was not the finance term. It actually came from the database. And then it started becoming, it's so common these days that now we say, okay, you have a bank transaction, right? And
Okay.
it's very near to us. So that's the point that we are trying to also build for agentic workflows. Can you say that because your agent can do 5 different things, if there was a fault at the first step or the second step, you cannot reverse it, right? And that is why a control like transactions or support for something similar like we have in banks, because you in a bank transaction you can roll everything back, right? Because the system is designed like that. So that's what we need also for agentic pipelines, and this is something that we are building, and many other labs and also industrial startups who actually build these agentic workflows are also working on that. I would say we need these kind of principled control when we talk about AI agents.
No, thank you very much, especially that meta memory. Yesterday, I was, looking for something to do with the lungs and lung function. Today, I was using one of the well-known agents to put together all the data on health spans and longevity, and suddenly decided to really dive deeper into the lungs. Now I know it's meta memory from a completely different session yesterday. So wonderful to know, and also weird that, based on what somebody could be looking at yesterday, they might get a completely different set of results on a important problem the next day related to health. So very important point. There is a wonderful question that Manoj has asked that links to this. He wants to know what is the best practice for AI-enabled system that analyzes patient data using differential prediction, supported by a RAG for the final result. And this is for chronic and rare disease front. Any one of you is, who wants to take it can take it. But I would imagine one line will remain. Or if you have agents in there, worry about distractors because they will, basically make your RAG very worthless. But go ahead. Anyone, please. Vikalp, you want to take this?
Yeah,
I'm sure this is the
yeah,
kind of problems you're dealing with.
yeah, no, absolutely. So, I so say if you have a narrower problem statement, like one is if you can just go ahead and for differential diagnosis across the board, it's a very different problem statement altogether. But what I would rather do is I would try to build it out in a way that it is much more focused. And this much more focused approach would actually mean that you have a rack pipeline that is actually solving for this, because the broader the scope is, and as Professor Akhil was also saying, that your agent is now actually thinking about so many things, right? From the memory to context to RAG and so forth. And the chances of going a little haywire or hallucinating or going beyond what is expected is much higher. So if you're able to narrow it down, your differential diagnosis related challenges, leverage a right kind of a medical model or fine tune a medical model over any kind of like what we do, then on top of it have uh, like a layer which is basically doing a RAG. If you're using a frontier, obviously the RAG can be leveraged on the frontier models as well, and have a very focused memory and the context layer. So that's the sort of the stack would look like. If you want to make it like a very generalized sort of agent or a space, then I think, yeah, it's a pretty different sort of a work altogether, because then you would have multiple agents working together to actually challenge each other, and then coming back to the differential diagnosis that you want to eventually spit it out. So yeah, like short answer from what we have learned so far.
Thank you very much. Very useful. Let me again ask people if there are any more questions they want answered, they can put it in. Otherwise, I'm going to ask a question that after the Anthropic fable being released, taken back, released again came, where do you see for sovereign AI in these areas, particularly when you're looking at deployment and consistency and ability to control? Do you foresee that we will see in health, we will move increasingly towards stable models in our control compared to the frontier models, which are typically always ahead on every benchmark? What will be the, I mean, I see there will be a trade-off. Where do you see the field going? And this maybe, Vasantha, I'm going to start with you because you have to think of this as a doctor. Would you value stability or would you value best possible performance?
Actually, the kind of effort, investment, and diversity that you need to build such models, if you have, again, I see the sovereign, non-sovereign as a political problem, not a technical or a domain problem, right? And I don't know, I have no stand on the political part of the question, but
Of
on
course.
the clinical side of the question, I think it doesn't matter what is your data source. If the performance meets, thankfully, uh, you know, uh, some few minor variations are there between the Indian and the Western population. In fact, we did a normative brain study across the country, comparing it against the Western population. We ended up knowing that the Indian brains are smaller than the Western brains, and most of the Indian male brains are smaller than the Indian female normal brains. But those are all kind of biological differences. But if the AI performance is going to be affected by such biological variations, you need to build some kind of a sovereign model to that, which is catering to your need. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what's the source or the data source or the model make, build, country. If it solves my problem, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
More of the
I want to
value.
clarify my question. I didn't really mean sovereign AI model as built in India like Sarvam. What I
Okay.
meant more was a deployable open weight model that
Okay.
is controllable, will not change suddenly on you. I mean, again, Vikalp, and I know that you would, in your deployment systems, work with every possible model based on what
Yeah.
the customer needs. And that
Yeah.
is probably your answer. But in medicine, do you think specifically about if the degradation of performance or difference in performance is not much? If it is not much, then using an open weight model that you can freeze or control.
No, I'll maybe take the cue from what Professor Akhil also mentioned on transaction. And it's good to actually see historically also how technology has evolved the systems. We are a big believer in the open weight, open source, fine-tune ecosystem. And to us, think about what Professor Akhil was also mentioning. There is a technology that can solve for transactions. Now, there is a bank, they would go ahead and say that I would want to use a technology which is fully atomic. It will store the data, but it will have a capability of rolling back as well. And I'm going to put in an effort on having that atomic transaction leveraging a Oracle or a Postgres sort of a database. But there could be a company, they can say that, okay, I can go the NoSQL route where I can use a very large Cassandra or a DynamoDB sort of an environment where I'm okay with not that sort of a transactional accuracy, but by storing the information and converting my cost to more variable than more fixed and so on and so forth. And I think in healthcare also, we will see that a lot happening because healthcare is also regulated, healthcare is also data sensitive, healthcare is also from compliance standpoint, be it privacy aware and so on and so forth. And also use cases are very specific where there could be a cancer board And the conversation that are happening in cancer board has to actually be looked at in those aspects. And you don't want a frontier to actually go ahead and do that, where you can actually solve it with a very specific small language purpose driven model. So we have a big thesis on that. And I know world is into different sort of a debates also here, but we have a very big thesis on purpose driven models and open weight models.
No, fantastic answer, Vikalp. And to close, we'll ask the same question to you, Akhil. And I'm pretty sure you'll agree with a purpose-driven model more than anything else, but auditability is key. Over to you.
Yeah, I think I was also drafting the response to some of the questions in the chat. And I think this is what I was talking about, like that. Um, in my opinion, more than open source, it's or fully open. People have now started talking about fully open, where the weights are open, data is open, because that's also very important, right? I think the auditability part is the most important aspect. Like even with a closed source model, if you can literally nail down the parts of the system which you can audit properly, right? For instance, we showed with this paper that I was showing, right? I mean, it felt really truly relevant, right? Not a shameless plug, right? It literally, because we showed that you can make differential diagnosis auditable, even with models like where you don't have access to their weights, or I mean, you're using these models behind an API, right? So I think the point is, in the world where we live in, right, I think you raise a very important point. Is it like, should we wait for a model that is we own it fully, right? And I agree with your definition about sovereign. It doesn't mean that it's built in India or China, right? It's basically if we can deploy it in our infrastructure, right? We own it. We know that suddenly when we are using an API, someone will not switch the model at the back, right? The platform will not change that, okay, now GPT-5 points to some other model and we are happily accessing it as GPT-5, right? So the point is that, is the capability more important or is the ownership more important, right? And I think I've been in debates about sovereign technology, right? Digital technologies even, right? Not just AI, where people talk about, should we keep using Microsoft products, right? Because one day if Microsoft decides to pull the plug, we are done, right? But my point is, like, you cannot always take that angle, right? You cannot say that sovereignty means that, you know, if a big company decides to say that, okay, we don't offer you the solution anymore, I am hopeful then there will be some other company, right? You cannot build everything in house. But to this extent, the thing that you can still do is you can make conscious decisions to make sure that you are able to audit the decisions, or anything that goes into the model and comes out of it, you have a full visibility and as much visibility as you can get. So we should strive for that, even though with closed source models. But there are times where you need an open source model, or a model that was built for a purpose. For instance, there are many Indic languages. Servam is a great example for that, which has been funded by many different bigger companies. I know Gemini, or I mean, Google has funded Servam to a very different level. This is I know personally because the head of Google DeepMind India is also was used to by me, my mentor, when I used to work in Xerox research 10 years ago. And he was telling me, right, they keep chatting with Servam people as well, right? So the point is literally they have built it for, the very well for at least 10, 20 different languages in India. And their goal is to actually literally make it for all the different languages. And it's also dialects, right, that matter when we talk about speech. So I think there we literally need models which are sovereign also to the extent that they are made for the people and by the people who know those people, right? So then that comes the angle that it's not political, but it's about the know-how of your end user base. But yeah, I would end it that auditability is the most important factor in all cases.
Thank you very much. That's a very nice
Just
democratic
two
type of a
cents.
plug. Yes,
Now that
Vasantha.
now that I understood the question properly, just two lines. I would love to have an open source model in healthcare. The only problem is there is a regulatory requirement for any model to be deployed. There is that's absolutely impossible gateway to pass through for any of those open source model, because the kind of documentation, cybersecurity, and the fees, in fact, the FDA submission fees is $28,000, right? So yeah, if there is a mechanism in which we can pass through the regulatory barrier, probably open source is the way to go. Thank you.
Fantastic ending. And that's exactly why WHO does not take a stand on what model, it's only the right model. for the purpose. In healthcare, it's always the purpose. It's AI for health, not health for AI. And that in that line, AI for health, equity, accuracy, everything together, I think lies responsibility. Fantastic seminar. Thank you all so much. We'll end here. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Thanks for the invite once again.
Bye, everyone.